let's start out with the Champions League. This has been really, really an interesting tournament to me so far, Chris, because the English teams that were there, you have three teams that frankly probably haven't had their best seasons. Liverpool, who had struggles in the middle of the season, and then once Virgil van Dijk came back, they figured out some things in the midfield. Then you had, they've got some things, figured out up front now as well, but they didn't have a great showing in the Champions League. Chelsea didn't have a bad showing in the Champions League, even though it's been a bad season for Chelsea domestically, and then Spurs have been a train wreck from Jump Street. But so it's Man City versus Madrid, and then you have two Serie A clubs right now in Inter and AC Milan. What's your read on what you're seeing in the semifinals of the Champions League so far?
Interesting. Both semifinals interesting for different reasons. First of all, City on fire. You wouldn't bet against them, but they're against Real Madrid, who it doesn't matter what kind of season they're having domestically. Unbelievable. Champions League, they just own it. 14 times they've won the thing, and so you can never write them off. The holders, they're not going to give it up easily. And after the first leg, 1-1, it's still anybody's game, quite honestly. Now, you'd think City, they're good favourites for the treble, but I'll tell you what, I hope Pep knows what he's doing, because Madrid are just ready to pounce. The other one, I mean, what are the chances? Two Milan teams, two teams, the same city, share a stadium, and they're playing the semi-final of a Champions League. I mean, what an atmosphere, and it could really go off in this second leg with the crowd I'm talking about. Hopefully, it's a better game than the first leg. Go watch that one, and if City get through, I don't see them having too much to worry about. But yeah, great semi-finals, both for different reasons.
Yeah, and it really seemed like that second game you mentioned, the two Serie A clubs, two Milan clubs going at it. Man, that's like a commercial for Serie A right now. A league that looks like it's falling behind a little bit, right? I mean, first, right now, it seems like Premier League at the top, and maybe this is just the perception in the States. Premier League at the top, La Liga 2, Serie A 3, or depending on where you want to go with Ligue 1 in France. Serie A right now, and especially in the States, does not have a particularly big following. Part of that is the television contracts they've agreed to. They just took whoever gave the most money, as opposed to looking at who's going to create the most growth for the sport so they can make the most money. So there aren't a ton of Serie A fans in the States. And this is, for a lot of people, probably their first look at these two clubs. And I am interested to see what they can do. Now I'll ask you this, though, about Manchester City. We do take more of an EPL bend since it's the top league in the world right now. Does it speak to what the EPL is this year, that maybe it's a down year in the league, that there's only one English team in the semifinals, and frankly, City right now looks mortal in the Champions League, while they just look absolutely unstoppable in domestic league?
It does a bit. Although recently, probably the last decade or so, we're used to two English clubs being in the semi-finals. But really, it's looking more like a flashback to the 80s, this is, because back in the 80s, 90s, the Serie A was televised. They got a lot of. It was very popular in England. Sunday afternoon, you had a Serie A game on, and it was a lot of English players were going over there to play. So a lot of the top players were playing. So it was a place to be almost. So it seems to be a bit of a resurgence now. Napoli winning the league, first time since Maradona helped them, I believe, to win the league. So, it's back to the good old, it seems like back to the good old days for Italy. And it looks like a 4 from the 80s in the Champions League. But yeah, maybe it is a reflection of the troubles that a lot of the English teams, the traditionally strong English teams, have been going through. And the newcomer to this whole look really is, if you look back over the decades, is Manchester City. The other three have been there many a time.
Yeah, and let me ask you then, looking at Inter, looking at Madrid, do you think that it's a benefit to them that they aren't really involved right now domestically? There's no chance for them to win their domestic league, so maybe they could put everything into trying to win the Champions League? Or do you think at this point, once you're in the semifinals, everybody's putting everything they can into winning the Champions League?
Well, if Arsenal had won, if they were still in the race, if they'd have won at the weekend, I think that might be a good case for that. But I think now City are home and dry pretty much on that. So that takes the pressure off them. City just got to win. Well, they got to win one game out of two. And then they're home and dry with the league. So I don't think the pressure is as much now on City, and they're not split now with their commitments. They've still got the FA Cup to deal with, but I think it has helped them. Real Madrid always seem to, like I said earlier on, they sort of have save something special for the Champions League. Milan, they look like they got one foot in the final. So yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough game for whoever gets into the final.
Do you think this can close the gap a little bit? I remember there's a piece that you sent me a few months ago from the 80s where Maradona is talking about playing a friendly with an English side with his Serie A club. And Maradona said, wow, they mentioned one player specifically said he's good enough to play in Italy. And it was kind of a big deal that Maradona thought this guy was good enough to play in Italy. And now you look at it and you think, I mean, at best, Serie A is the third best league that's out there, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting how times have changed over the last 30, 40 years. But do you think maybe this can help lead to a resurgence of Serie A, or do you just say too much money in the English game, Spanish game, those top teams in the Spanish game, there's too much money, and Serie A is just kind of always going to be third at best?
It may well be. I think a lot of players, they did go for the money, but they also went for the cultural experience and learn a new way of playing soccer. At the time, English had a style, the Italians had a style, and the Spanish had a style. And I think a lot of the English players who went there, they learned a new style, if you like, and they enjoyed doing that, or they were that kind of player who could excel in that league. I think now the styles are very intermixed, where you've got a lot of Italian coaches in England and you've got a lot of Spanish coaches in England. It's more cosmopolitan, it's more international in every country. So it's not as crucial. I think any players that perhaps want to go, they won't be going for the money. They'll be going for the experience. They'll be going to perhaps find a new way of playing or add to the way that they play. Will it be a resurgence? Yeah, it could well be. It could well be. And a lot of the players, they got that much money now. They might not necessarily move to Italy for the money. They might want to go just to have a cultural change.
All right. So let me ask you about City. Do you think this is the year? Does Pep get the Champions League monkey off of his back?
Do you know what? I really hope so. I've got a soft spot for Manchester City. Being a Wolves fan, in the 70s and 80s, City and Wolves were a similar type of level of club. They were usually around the Premier League and didn't win a lot. But City had some fantastic players back in the day, like Colin Bell, Francis Lee, Mike Summerby, and they were at Rodney Marsh. They were a really good team to watch. So that's why I'd really like them to win. I know you shouldn't really, if you support one team, you shouldn't really want another team to do well, but I would, and I'd like them to get. I'd like him to get that monkey off the back. I hope he knows what he's doing. In the first leg, Pepe didn't make any substitutions at all, which is never heard of. I mean, so I wonder what he's up to there. He
always does something. Doesn't it seem like he always does something weird that he never does in matches? When we get to deep into the Champions League, he always starts. I don't want to say overthinking it, but it feels like he's overthinking it a little bit.
I know. Yeah, you're right. And he got away with it. They played Everton, won at the weekend comfortably, 3-0. So now, hopefully, everybody's rested, and they're good to go. They won't make any slip-ups in this second. Surely not. They should just go for it and play their game. And he shouldn't tweak it too much just to suit Real Madrid. But you don't know what he's thinking, do you?